Hi there, this is Prague Talk, a podcast from Radio Prague International. My name is Ian Willoughby. This time out, my guest is one of my very favourite people to interview, the great Czech-born US-based illustrator and writer Petr Sís, or Petr Sís as he's known internationally. The artist has just seen the publication of his latest work, a book of In Praise of Mystery by the American poet laureate Ada Limon. In fact, in a project years in the making, the poem has also been etched onto a NASA spaceship bound for Jupiter's moon, Europa. Petr Sís lives in New York State, and it was from there that he discussed the new book, as well as his poster for the Oscar-winning movie Amadeus, released 4 years ago this year, for this edition of Prague Talk. At the start of this month, a new book of yours came out, In Praise of Mystery. What is the story of In Praise of Mystery?
I have it here. So it just came out. In Praise of Mystery came to me through the agent and the publisher last November. And it was almost like they said, we think maybe you don't want to do this. And I had no knowledge really about the poet laureates. This is very interesting because it's a poet laureate, young woman, 40-year-old woman, or 40-something woman, Ada Limon, who's very sort of like fiery. And she was doing a lot for poetry, but also she was commissioned by NASA and the Library of Congress to write a poem for this mission, which is going to the moon of Jupiter, which is a very important mission because the scientists are suspecting there is water on this moon called Europa. And it's a water which might be actually useful for us, or this mission will go for the next 6 years, whatever, flying to Europa. And because they wanted to make it more popular, more colorful, so it wouldn't be so scientific, they commissioned this wonderful, sprightly woman to write poem. And that was very, very hard because it's almost like, you know, how do you write an official poem? And she said it was very hard. And she then approached it from position of people, of us people, what do we need to live, that we are made of water and we're looking at these planets. And they asked me that they decided W.W. Norton, they would make a book out of it. So it sounded great until they said, but we only have 2 months to do it because the mission's going in October. It's one thing to say yes, and then you look at it and you see the words and you see it's very, very difficult. Like it was difficult for her to put it in words. It was very difficult to take her voice and put it in pictures. And I think what happened was many, many, many sketches and working through Christmas, New Year. But I think the editor, Simon Boughton, was very sort of like, I needed guidance. And I think in the end, we have something very, I would say, unique, which is very humane. And I think it was important to me and to her that in this time of lots of disturbing news in the world, especially if you have kids and stuff, this is a very positive book about like people, mankind, planet, how we are, where we are, all of us. So I like it. It's a little book, but it's getting lots of attention.
And in practical terms, did you collaborate with her at all, or did she give you any notes or anything, or was it more through the publisher?
Yeah, good question. I think everybody was afraid how it all comes together, because there was not just me and her, but there was also NASA. And because they worked together all 4 years, this was like almost invading somebody's home. So I did the best I could between the publisher and me. And I think then what some publishers can do, presented it to her in some way when now she said, oh my God, he's like living in my head. This is what I've envisioned. This is great. Purposefully, I was doing it with hands and with paints, so it would look handmade, that it's not some, because I look at the pictures from the different missions and it's so technically the photographs. So this is very sort of almost naive approach to it. But that way it makes it very, I think, human. And she loved it. And then we met for the first time 2 days ago in New York Public Library and again in Washington, D.C. And we like each other very much because she says as it is, like when the people ask, how do you come up with ideas? She said, sometimes you don't have ideas, sometimes you don't have it. So she's very, very appealing, beautiful person.
And generally, is space a theme that appeals to you, Peter?
Generally, I would have no idea, even after this book, how to deal with it. I bump into it a few times in some children's book illustrations. When I think my the vision of space is so limited from like the Czech folk illustrations with some star. I mean, just the whole vastness and the scientific thinking is not really my kind of cup of tea.
As well as lots of books that you wrote yourself and illustrated, you've collaborated many times on other people's books. How do those two tasks or two approaches compare for you as an artist? Working with somebody else and working completely solo?
Being the product of the art schools in Prague, you want to be an artist, you want to come up with your own project, you want to come up with your philosophy, if the children care or not, and you want to be smart or whatever. But then I think you look around and see there were so many more people who were much more clever. And also what happened once I ended up as an immigrant in New York, I had to make living and I became editorial illustrator and illustrator for hire. I didn't like it because I wanted to be this intellectual force, but it's so hard to do. And even if you do it, then it's so hard to sell. And then you can also find out you were completely stupid. So I became proud of being editorial illustrator because I had to react to lots of things in politics, in cooking magazine, as well as scientific magazine, business magazine. I had to try different techniques, and I was many times pleased when somebody would write to me that they understood the subject well. And I realized that doing books for other people sometimes can be relaxing in the way that you do not have to invent the story. You don't have to invent the wheel. You just try to come up with the best solution. And already when you commit to the story, you're doing it because you have some feelings. I don't think I ever did. Well, maybe in the very beginning, I did some things for business magazines when I would make the duck flying up and they say, no, this is about the stock market going. So I didn't understand, and illustration was purely decoration. But this, for example, I loved the poem. I loved her philosophy. It was extremely hard, but it reminded me of animation, which I started with. So the whole book in the beginning was like this flow of pictures. So it was a pleasure and it was a relief because I'm working on a book of mine once again. And it's difficult. It's difficult to be, especially when you get older, you go this direction, then you go that direction, then you finish it. And then in one country, they say, this is really neat. And in other countries, they say, what is this about? And so this was a wonderful project.
One of your best known works was the poster for Amadeus, which this year has been around for exactly 40 years. What was the background to you getting that commission? As far as I know, you hadn't actually been in the States so long when you got that job.
I was. This is like the Amadeus with those stretched hands. That's me coming to America because I was in Prague in February 1982 with my father at home. It was snowing, and somebody rang the bell, and there was Miloš Forman, Peter Schaefer, the playwright, and producer Michael Hausman, who were scouting locations in Prague for Amadeus. And then Michael Hausman was pleased that I speak some English and that I might be helping with the making the film. Summer that year, I went to work on my own film on animation in America. I came to America, got visa for 3 months. My projects didn't work mostly because East Europe and Soviet Union boycotted Olympic Games and I was called back. Even this is 2 years before Olympics. And I decided not to go to finish the film because I was halfway through the film. And once I was working on this, I got phone call from, so let's say this is half a year later or maybe a year later. And I get phone call from Miloš Forman who said, do you want to just try to make a poster for the movie Amadeus? And I was flown to Berkeley, to Oakland, where they were editing the film, shown the film. The director's cut like 5 hours of it. I started to do doodles. I came up with some ideas. And I realized the whole big image, the producer, Sozens is interested in was the figure of Salieri or Comte or whatever, the dark figure with the mask, which the death coming to get. So there was already used in London before something like that for the play. And I came up with versions of it. So I filled it up inside with like scenes from the film. I did different skies, So in the end, it was a very simple picture. I had no money, so it was amazing that they said, so we're going to give you whatever it was like somebody would give you million. Of course, it wasn't million because there also was for the producer, if he went to some agency, it would be much more. But I was just like happy with anything. And what was my wonderful Hollywood experience was that he just took the napkin on the table in the restaurant, said, so now you sign here, you will get your money, but you will never want to get any rights from any record covers or CD covers or any merchandise. So I signed gladly everything because I had absolutely nothing. And it was just like joy. And also it was for Milos. And I have to say that till today, the Americans, if they would know my work, and most of them probably wouldn't, but if I say I did that poster for Amadeus, then they know the poster for Amadeus. There are like 3 things I did which they know because they've seen it somewhere. And I think the poster was purely for American, no, also was for German market, but I know in France and other countries very different posters, but it was an incredible calling card. And when I came to New York and was looking for work as the editorial illustrator, this was a power card I had, yeah.
Did you get to, in some way at all, enjoy the success of Amadeus? For example, did you go to premieres or meet the stars or anything like that?
Well, I met most of these stars and we were friends with Elizabeth Ettridge, Mary F. Abrams. No, I was so very happy for Milos, and I also realized how finicky it is, how unpredictable, because when I did the poster for Amadeus, I had enough money to buy old car. And in that time, through some coincidence, because I couldn't get any job, I didn't have any films, I didn't dare to go back to Prague. I met this wonderful librarian who said, I will try to get you a job teaching at some art school, but also give me samples of your work. Let's make copies of some of your pictures. And she didn't tell me why. And I was coming to this library a few times a week, and all of a sudden I have this phone call, and it was a collect phone call, and it was from Maurice Sendak, who I knew the name vaguely. I didn't know him that well, but then I realized he's the most famous children's book illustrator and author in America. And he was calling me collect in Los Angeles and said, so I got your samples. And he was calling me collect too, because he said, if I call everybody who writes to me, I will go broke. So I'm just telling you, I like your pictures, but if you want to make it in children's books, and that was stunning because I never thought of children's books, especially in America. But he said, if you want to make it in children's books, you cannot live in that terrible place called Hollywood. That's like Tinseltown. That's awful. You have to come to Boston or New York. So that was this coincidence because he said it. I thought he's giving me clear path to my future. I can do children's books. He thinks that. So the money I got for the poster, I bought this secondhand Mustang, and I said, well, now I'm driving to New York, which is on the other side of America. On the map, you can see that. So I, without a map or any plan, I was just driving across New Mexico, Texas. So I'm trying to do actually a book now about like how it was crazy because I know how big it is, who I'm gonna meet, how all the landscapes were changing. And I had this illusion of America, which was far from reality. I thought it's like in Woodstock, everybody's got long hair and probably plays music. But I got to New York. I came to Sendak thinking he's going to say, you will do the books, you can stay, whatever. He said, okay, so here you are. And so by the time I got to New York, I had no place to stay. And Milos was so nice. He said, you can stay at my farm. And I remember at that farm, he had like a bunch of T-shirts prepared for, it was in nominations for Oscars. And the T-shirt said, not even nominated. He wanted to give it to the crew just in case they never will be nominated. Instead, they got like was one of the most successful films ever. So it just shows like he didn't know. And then I sort of enjoyed with him whatever I could, but I was so busy trying to make life for myself, find a place to stay, go to all these magazines and work. So I didn't enjoy it as much as I could.
Well, I wanted to ask you about Foreman as well, because whenever I see any interviews with him or him on stage or him speaking or even photos, he always seems like the coolest guy, the guy who really knows how to enjoy himself. Was he like that?
I think he was. I was thinking about that also, because he was always friendly, pleasant, with great sense of humor. I've seen him upset just a few times, a little bit. Once when I was driving him to tennis stadium and got lost because I'm a confused person. But he was incredibly kind person and helpful. And I've seen him helping people when they didn't even know. He helped me so much, which mostly just recommendation, calling somebody, getting in touch with somebody, which he didn't need when I needed to borrow money. I mean, he would always support me to the fullest. He loved Voskovec and Verik and the songs of Jiří Suchý. And he would always be singing some song or repeating some joke. So he was always very, very pleasant. Yet sometimes when you then caught him in the more serious moment, he had a clear idea about, did he like this film? Did he like this book? I think he had enough experiences in New York. And I remember he took me to a very important exhibition and he said, I have to buy some painting here, but go and find the smallest painting you can because I have to get one. And I wanted to get like all the refreshments and alcohol. And he said, no, you don't eat here. Let's get this painting, say hello to Mr. Mailer, and we can eat somewhere else. So he would give me these lessons, how you behave if you deal with producers, whatever. Of course, he was on much higher level with his connections, but he was very professional and very cool about it. He was genius and everything, but he also worked hard on the whole system, I think.
The final thing I wanted to ask you about, Peter, you've already referred to it, I guess, is what you're working on now. You're doing a book about you coming to America, I take it.
Right. So I'm doing this book about me coming to America, and then it's like a road movie. Then I go through these pages through different. It's not just states I'm driving through; it's a states of mind, and it's coming all the way from Los Angeles to New York. The problem is, like with my later books, it's always who is it for? In the sense, not just I can now do things for adults maybe or that, but it's very difficult to choose the angle as being now living here for 40 years since Amadeus. So by a few years longer than I lived in Czech Republic. Do I look at it as somebody who just came to America and goes like, wow, this is like Woodstock Festival, this is Kenneth Heat, and this is like Rolling Stones singing this song. And then I would have to get in the whole picture like we used to know the songs, but we didn't know the lyrics completely. So only now I'm finding out, oh my God, this song was pretty stupid. So is it my observation as this young guy coming from Czech about America, which then turns out to be completely different? Because like the idea of New Mexico, where all these incredible Indian tribes live, which we played as a boys, as Comanche, Apache, whatever. How do I talk about it now when in critical view of America? So it's like all these things. Or are these people who look like hippies, are they all hippies? No, some of them are begging for money. And it's completely different cultures sort of change here in this attitude. So that's my problem now, how to be sincere and not to go into that.
But this trip you're talking about across America, it's 40 years ago. Are your memories so strong, or have you had to kind of recreate your memories or do some almost research into where you went, or is everything still fresh in your head?
Absolutely not. And I wish I remember just this razzle dazzle, the mess of like these things which I never seen before. I remember the confusion of these huge billboards with, I knew it's food, but I never seen food like that, which would be French fries or the drumsticks or whatever is it, wings. I mean, it's all in Prague now too. But when one has to remember, we have never seen anything like that. Everything of little color, rainbow color somewhere from, we thought, oh, this is great, this is this. But it's also what I'm going through as the sort of recollection what we thought. But I'm also having on my own memories, like when I did my films in Prague, which was called Island for 6,000 Alarm Clocks. It was immediately sort of taken out of the distribution because it told people about that they should leave on the island and ring as they please. However, I have a whole double spread with alarm clocks driving somewhere through Kentucky. But then I realized, like, if I do this book now, people don't know what the alarm clocks are. What are these things which were ringing in the morning and which you would have to hit with your hand? Then I have lots of stuff because I was a disc jockey about the records, so going to get records from the record companies. And then the whole thing actually had a major obstacle that I was making phone calls this whole trip because I felt very lonely. And I didn't know what it means, collect call, because he called me collect. So I thought it's something very respectful. So I was calling Sendak, who didn't want to spend money, from every gas station collect to tell him, Mr. Sendak, I'm in Arizona. This is really neat here. And he was going berserk. But today I can't explain what is public phone, how you put the coin in it. Then the operator came on and he said, I'm calling collect. Will Mr. Sendak accept? So these things are little technical snacks, which means the book would immediately become the book for generation of 60s or something. But maybe it's true because the music I was thinking to use as a sort of like with the road movie would be also the music of my life then. And everybody would say, who are Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young, or Jody Collins, yeah.
Well, I'm from a slightly later generation, but I'm very much looking forward to the book, Peter. Good luck with the whole project.
Okay, thank you.
Many thanks indeed to Petr Sís, or Petr Sís, who I was speaking to remotely in the first half of October 2024. Prague Talk is a podcast from Radio Prague International, and if you enjoyed my chat with Mr. Sís, why not also look up some of the 100+ earlier editions and subscribe wherever you get podcasts. But for now, from me, Ian Willoughby, thank you so much indeed for listening to Prague Talk, and talk to you again very soon.